You've just received 45 system of equation homework problems. The directions say, solve it by row reducing. Now you start solving it by hand, and after 20 minutes you find you still don't have the right answer. So what happened? In my experience, there are two hurdles students face with row reducing. First, deciding on the correct row operations. Second, doing the actual calculations. But when it's your first time row reducing, it's incredibly difficult to do both correctly. Row reducing involves using 3 different elementary row operations. This app allows you to work through and choose the row operations without having to do the actual calculations. You get to focus solely on practicing and experimenting. So first thing, let's enter in the coefficients. You can swipe around the screen to move to different coefficients. You can also add additional variables and equations, up to 4 each. You can use decimals and fractions, but the decimals will be converted to fractions, so your answers are always exact, no rounding. For now, let's keep it simple with this system. Now our system has 2 equations and 2 variables. After entering in the coefficients, let's click on Set Up Augmented Matrix. If you need to adjust the size or change coefficients, just press Setup. The goal is to use your 3 row operations to get your matrix to row-reduced echelon form, or RREF. Let's look at each operation. The first row operation is to swap rows. In our matrix, we want the first number in row 1 to be a 1. We call it the leading one, but right now it's a 4. But row 2 has a 1, so let's swap them. Simply click which 2 rows you want to swap, and click Swap. After you get your leading 1, all the other numbers in that column should be a 0. That means the 4 here needs to be a 0. This is what the third operation does. Now the setup is always like this. We need 3 different pieces. Identify the row you want to change. What do you need to add to this number to get 0? That would be -4. Identify the pivot row. This is the current row that has the leading 1. It will always be outlined. The operation looks like this. You have your changed row plus -4 times the pivot row. Open up the third operation and type that in. Swipe left and right to move around. With that set up correctly, press Done. If the operation was correct, then once you press Done, you'll get a 0. If you don't, you can always press Undo and try again. The app will tell you when you're done with the current column. You're done when you have a 1 in the pivot row and 0s everywhere else in that column. We call that the unit column. Now just repeat the process trying to make the second column into a unit column. The pivot row and column are indicated by the boxed element. For us right now it's row 2 and column 2. This means we need to make the -3 into a +1. But we don't have any rows to swap with. When this happens, we can use the second operation. The second operation lets us multiply every number in a row by a constant. This constant is chosen very carefully. Here's how it's done. Find the pivot element, again the current box number, it's the -3. What do you multiply -3 by to get a +1? Well, that will always be the reciprocal. In our case is -1/3. Now suppose you were stuck and didn't know what to do. You can always click on Hint. The hint will give you a variety of tips based on where you are during row reducing. Here, it says no leading 1 was found in column 2. That's true, it was a -3. But a non-zero was found in row 2. So scale row 2 to have a leading 1. Now scaling means multiply by a constant. Now if you know what to do from here, go for it. But if you still need some extra help, click Hint again. Now it says to multiply row 2 by -1/3. Open up the second row operation and type in -1/3 times row 2. Make sure you switch it to say row 2. If you don't switch it and you use row 1, you'll get the following message. Row 1 is a completed row. Never multiply a completed row by a constant. So let's go back and do it correctly. -1/3 times row 2. If done correctly, it should now say a 1 in the pivot element. Lastly, we need to make the rest of the column zeros. Let's use our simple template for the third row operation again. What row do I want to change? What do I add to 2 to get 0? And what is the pivot row? Let's open up the third operation and put in row 1 minus 2 times row 2, and press done. Congrats, we are now row reduced. To read an answer, do the following. Find the leading one in the first row. Happens to be in the x column. Read across the constant side, and that's what x equals, -9. Find the leading one in the second row. It's in the y column, so read across to the constant side. You see that y equals 6. Now, if you don't know how to read the answer or you need help, just press hint. It tells you have a unique solution of x equals -9 and y equals 6. Hey, what about that instant solution button you sort of avoided talking about this whole time? When this instant solution button is pressed, it will display all the row operations and matrices from start to finish in one go. It's extremely helpful if you've been working on a problem by hand and you can't find your mistake. You can quickly scan through the solution and find it. However, it is a premium ability. I know. But if you like my work, find the app helpful, or just want the shortcut, your purchase of this ability helps support me and my work and is greatly appreciated. Now that I purchased it, let's see what it can do. Go back to the beginning, and instead of going through the row operations, we click Solution instead. You can see it shows you all the row operations we went through and the final answer. The last thing I want to mention is this app can identify between no solution and infinitely many solutions. It can also write the infinitely many solution scenario using parameters. Many textbooks and online homework systems use this way of displaying their answer. Thanks for watching my tutorial video on my row reduction app. Good luck with the homework.